Here is how to predict cash flow based on milestone payments for your projects. I'm going to walk you through exactly how to manage that inside of Monday.com. By the way, if you'd like us to help you set up Monday.com for your business, check out the link below. We would love to help. Anyway, as you can see here, I'm inside of my example Monday.com system. Now, as I'm sure you probably know, a lot of projects are broken down into milestones and you are paid based on the completion of each milestone. Now, it's obviously really important that milestones are on time because it affects your cash flow. And if they are delayed because your project's delayed, then it's really important to be able to see the impact that has on your cash flow. So in this video, I'm going to walk you through the setup that I would recommend, or I would set up myself, so you'd be able to see the status of all of your milestones associated with a particular project, which is essentially a contract, and the cash flow when that cash is going to be due in for each of those milestones and consequently for each of those projects, and then you can manage your cash flow accordingly. Cool. So first and foremost, what we're going to go ahead and do is create a new board. This board, I'm going to call it contracts. The reason I'm calling it contracts is you would have a project, and then from a project, there's an associated contract, right? And each project has their own contract. And then within each contract, there are payment terms or milestones, whatever you want to call them. So project to contract to payment terms. I don't really need a projects board here. You can imagine we have one. But anyway, we're creating our contracts board first and foremost. Then we can select our privacy terms. So do you want anyone to have access to this board? Private, so only you and select individuals can have access. And then shareable, if you'd like to share your contracts board outside of the system to other people that don't have a Monday.com login, you are more than welcome to. I'm going to go ahead and leave it as main. And then the item that we're managing here is contracts. So I'll just write that in and go ahead and press create board. Now, of course, the data that you are looking to capture on your contracts board is entirely up to you. So you can have active contracts and then completed contracts as your two groups, which is what I'm going to go for here. So active contracts, and then we would have completed contracts. So again, nice and simple. You could even have terminated contracts if you want to. So we go active. And then, well, actually, hang on. I'll go active. We'll put it in purple. I don't know what I'm doing here. And then we go green as in completed. And then we'll just set the status options to match those. So we've got active, active, and then we'll have completed. Oh, Monday, yeah, every time. And then we'll go completed as well. There we go. And then what I might do actually is I might just have cancelled or voided contracts as another group. Change that to purple there, and then I'll add another group which is like voided contracts, just in case we need to account for contracts that do get voided for whatever reason. So now I've got my active, completed, and voided contracts. What I'm then going to do is just automate top right hand corner, go to manage, and then create an automation. And all I want to do is say when status changes to active, move item to group active, and then we'll repeat the same for completed and also voided. When the status changes to completed, move item to group completed, create automation. And then finally, when status changes to voided, move item to group voided, create automation. There we go. So now we've just got basic setup. We've got completed. If I change this to active and I'll change this one to voided, you can see how they move across nice and easy. Now we have a date column here. I'm going to use this date column and I'm going to set this as date created. And then what I'm going to do is I'm just going to restrict the column editing. And then I'm going to go to automate again and create another automation and just say when item is created, set the date created to today. So then we know every time a new contract is added, where it will automatically populate the date in which it was created. We can then use this for reporting purposes, which I'll probably demonstrate later on in this video. But you can see here that then automatically populates. We've also got a files column. Now, you don't have to do this, but you might upload your contract file to your contracts board relating to that particular project if you would like to. So it's up to you, but obviously you can upload it. And then we can add some other data points. So anything relating to a contract, you can go ahead and upload. So if there are certain terms that you want to upload or anything else, like a status. So let's say, as an example, we've got contract type. And then we would have, I don't know, type 1, type 2, type 3, very imaginative, type 1, type 2, and then type 3. And then we could delete these other ones that we do not need as an example. There we go. Now, the reason we keep this separate from projects is because on a project, you don't necessarily want to manage contractual terms. And also, there's a good chance that there's data points on your contracts board here that you probably want to log that I've just not mentioned. So other data points that you need to be mindful of. Now we've got a very basic contracts board set up. The next thing that we're going to want to be thinking about is how do we manage the payments or the expected or anticipated payments for this particular project. Okay, so in order to do so, what I would do is I would add another board, and this board will be our payment phases. I don't know, payment phases, what else can I call it? Phased payments, I don't know, payment structure, payment terms, I like that one. So obviously every contract will have payment terms. Again, you've got your privacy options, and then I'm just going to put payment terms in the terminology that we're using, and then go ahead and create another board. So now we would have multiple payment terms per contract, each contract associated with a project. In fact, there might even be multiple contracts associated with a project. That I can imagine as well. So then with our payment terms, we've got two payments. We've got three options, I guess. We've got upcoming payments. We've got completed payments, and then what we could probably have as well is outstanding payments. And then we could probably also have, a payment would probably trigger an invoice, which would be on another board as well. This is how comprehensive it could all get. But what I would have is maybe delayed payments. This is as a result of poor project management, or delays, not necessarily poor project management, but delays to the project. So we've got upcoming, we've then got delayed, and then we've got completed payments. We would assume that all payment terms within a contract would get paid, but sometimes they might be delayed dependent on the status of the project or the phase itself. Hopefully that makes sense. So then we just need to update our status column here. So we got our little upcoming, we would have delayed, and then we would have completed. Awesome. So I'll just delete that. Why does it do that? Very odd. Delete label, and then put that up there. So upcoming, delayed, and then completed. So then I'll go to automate, top right hand corner. We're just doing the same thing with the status option. So we go status, when status changes to upcoming, move item to group, upcoming, create automation. And then we can do another one when status changes to delayed, move item to group, delayed. And then finally, when status changes to completed, when status changes to completed, move item to group, completed, create automation. Okay, again, pretty basic stuff. This is now we've done the basics, it gets a little bit more exciting. So we've just added the date created, as we did in the previous board, and we would add another date column as well, which would be my recommendation. Then we'll have date completed as well. So this is the date in which this particular payment was completed. We'll restrict the column editing for both of these, and then what we'll do is just go to automate again. The first automation we need to create, which is when item is created, set the date created to today. So date created being today, and then what we can do is just use the existing automation that we've already got. When the status changes to completed, move item to group, completed payments group, and then set the date completed to today as well. So then I can see on average how long it takes for us to get paid, or between a new payment being created and a new payment being completed. Cool. We probably won't need files here, so I can go ahead and delete that. It's not something that I'm particularly worried about. And you can see here, if I then change the status to delayed and change that to upcoming, and then change that to upcoming, like it all moves around, which is exactly what we want. That's what we're after, right? Why is that not moved? Why have you not moved? Oh, well, I'm sure it will. Anyway, what we then need to do is connect our payment terms to our contracts. To do that, we're going to use a connection column. So use a connect boards column, and we connect our payment terms, which is this one here, this board, to our contracts, and make sure we've just pressed create a two-way connection, and then just hit connect boards. So this is the contract associated with the payment term. What we can have, if we go back to our contracts board, I'm just going to delete all these examples, or like useless information here, just so we're super clear. We'll have example, let's just go with the example contract, hit enter. Okay. And then on our payment terms, we can associate each of our payments with our example contract. So what we would have is multiple payment terms associated with a particular contract. So you can see here we've now connected 3 payment terms to an example contract. We've got one that's upcoming, we've got one that's delayed, and then ultimately one that's completed. Now what we can go ahead and do, this is where it gets a little bit more interesting, a bit more useful, is we can add a numbers column. And then this numbers column dictates to us the phase value or term value, let's say, or payment value. I don't know. Choose, pick what you want. And then go to the 3 dotted button, go to settings, and then we can make this into whatever currency you want. So in this instance, let's just select the $sign. And then let's say the term value is 50,000 for this one. And then for this one, it's 180,000. And then for the one that's completed, let's say it was only 25,000. 25,000. There we go. Cool. So now we've got a value per each of our payments. Okay, which we can then go back to our contracts board. We can see all of the payment terms that have been associated with this particular contract. We can restrict the column editing on here so no one can make changes to it. And then more importantly, we can mirror over all of the payment term values as a sum to give us our contract value. So then we can go ahead and mirror up via connecting to the payment terms connection column our term value. So this is our contract value. There we go. What I can also do then is I can go ahead and work out how much is being paid. So I'll head back over to our payment terms board, and then I can see here that this one, status is equal to completed. This has obviously, as you can see, been paid, right? Whereas these two have not. So what we want to do is we want to go ahead and add a formula column. And this formula column is going to work out, when we tell it to only calculate the term value when the status is equal to completed. So give me the term value only where status is completed, and hit enter. So this will then only show us the paid value for all of our payment terms. As you can see that this one is missing, neither of them contain any data, but the one where the status is equal to completed does in fact contain data. I'm just going to show the column summary again and set the currency, and then I'll hide the column summary. So there we go, hide the column summary, and then I'll just restrict the column editing as well. But this is now useful because we can mirror across this information as well. So I can see that our contract value is 255,000. If I then mirror again, I can mirror over the amount that's already been paid for this particular contract. So you can see, oh, wrong one. We would go paid value, which you can see is 25,000. So paid value. And then what we can do is add a formula column, and we can work out the outstanding balance for this particular contract. Outstanding balance for this particular contract. And what we would do, obviously, is contract value minus paid value. Hit enter. So that would then give us our outstanding balance for this contract. We can then set this in the $sign and then hide the column summary again, and then we can restrict the column editing. So I can then quickly look at all of my active contracts, and I can see, well, what's our outstanding balance, how much we've got left for each of these contracts. But we can also do that on the payment level as well. So you can see we've got our term value of 50,000, 180,000, and then we've got a completed payment of 25,000. Now, what we also want to be able to do is manage when these payments are actually going to be coming in. This is consequently important for cash flow. So when is it expected to be completed? Now, this is where it gets way more complicated, because the simple version is what I am going to show you today. However, you can associate payment terms with phases. If you are then managing phases as a project within Monday.com, which I've shown you how to do in other videos on my YouTube channel, you can then connect the payment term with the phase. If the phase then gets delayed, then it will update on the payment term. Otherwise, you would have to manually do it. Unfortunately, that is too long-winded of a video. That is a few hours in length. So I'm just going to show you using a date column here now. So what we're going to do is we'll have payment due date or milestone date as an example. or let's just say completion date. I don't know why I'm using funny words. Completion date or expected completion date. Yeah, let's go. Expected dot completion date. Hit enter. So now I can say that this particular payment is due in on the 10th of September, as an example. This delayed payment was actually due in on, let's say, the 24th, and then this one, the expected completion date, was on the 4th, as an example. I don't know what I'm doing here. Let's knock this back to, let's say, June. So you can see that this is the expected completion date is the 24th. This is the expected completion date of the 10th. This one is obviously upcoming. This one is delayed because it's expected to be completed but hasn't been paid yet, or it has been completed but hasn't been paid yet, and this one has been completed and has been paid. So now we've got our expected completion date, and then we've got obviously the delayed status. So if the expected completion date arrives and the so what we would do is if the expected completion date arrives and the status is not completed, then we need to set this particular payment term to delayed. So we go to automate, top right hand corner, go to create automation, and then we say when date arrives, and the date arriving being the expected completion date. And then we say when date arrives at 7:45. That's fine by me. And only if, so we need to add a filter, and only if status is not equal, is not equal to completed, then we need to set or change the status to delayed. Yeah, so when expected completion date arrives, and only if the status is not completed, then we'll set it to delayed, because we're assuming that it's going to be expected to be completed by the 10th. What we could do if you wanted to is you could actually just add a delay to this as well. So you could say when, maybe 5 days after. So 5 days after expected completion date arrives, and only if status is not completed, then set status to delayed. That gives a 5-day buffer for someone to come in and just update it on your payment terms here. But that's the rule that we're going to run by. Now, when the payment term is equal to completed, what I would then have is another board, which is our invoices board, that would automatically create an invoice on the invoices board for that month. You could then integrate with your Xero or your QuickBooks and then automatically create the invoices based on the completion of the payment terms for that particular project. Again, it's getting quite sophisticated, but that is an option available to you. Now, going back to our contracts here, we've obviously got contract value, our paid value, our outstanding balance for all of our contracts. Obviously, that would then link up to our project as well. What we can do is we can automatically create payment terms dependent on something like the contract type. So what we could do is say automate top right hand corner and say when an item is created, and only if the status is equal to and the contract type is equal to type 1, then we know that type 1 always has 2 payment terms associated with it. So then we could create item in board and connect boards, and we create an item in the board phase payment terms, that's the one. And then we'll connect the contracts with the payment terms, and then we can just write in the information. So we don't need a lot of this information, but we would have the name, and then we would have, let's say, payment 1, number 1, and hit enter. And then we go ahead and press done. Then we can do the same for payment number 2. So if we go and say create item in board and connect boards again, and the board in this instance being payment terms, connect contracts with payment terms, create an item, and then we can again delete all of this information as it would be pulling over from our contract. But we hit create automation here. So now when a new item is created and the contract type is type number 1, then it automatically creates our payment terms. The only issue we do have is we can't automatically set the expected completion date, which is a bit frustrating, or at least we can't do that with the standard automations within Monday.com. But what I'm going to do is I'm just going to set this column as required now. So set column as required, and then I'm going to create a new contract. So this is our example contract. And then I'm going to set the contract type as type number 1 and then press create contract. What's going to happen is it's going to automatically populate my 2 payment terms on my payment terms board and then connect back to my contract. So as you can see here, both of those have now populated. I don't think I set that one to payment, the name payment number 2. Cool. I mean, if you already know the term value, and then you could automatically populate that as well. But that's entirely up to you. So then when the status is equal to completed for, let's say, payment number one, let's say that they've made their payment. You've obviously got a paid value is equal to 0. But let's say the payment value for payment number one was 15,000, as this is one of the smaller engagements you might do. And let's say phase 2 is 45,000. There we go. You can see that we've paid 15. That will then update on here, our contract value, and then we have our outstanding paid value. Now, the next thing that we're obviously going to want to do is report on a few things. We want to report on all of the delayed payments and how much in delayed payments there are and how many days they are delayed. We also want to report on our cash flow. So our expected completion date, which means our expected payment, or at least knowing roughly. I mean, it gets a little bit grey because you've got to factor in payment terms as well as completion, but we're going to keep it basic. Obviously, you can factor that in if you wanted to. And then also I just want to know what our contract value is, how much paid value, how much is outstanding as well. So we're going to go ahead and create a dashboard here. And this is going to be our contracts and payments dashboard. Privacy options entirely up to you. Something like this would probably be a private board or dashboard, and then you can go ahead and create your dashboard, and then we want to connect our contracts and our payment terms to our contracts and payments dashboard. Now, the first widget that I want to know, and it's just going to be a numbers one, is I want to see total outstanding contract or total outstanding value. So I want to see how much money is still due in for our business. So I would go settings and then one by one, and then I just want to see outstanding balance. Just go to boards first and just unselect the payment terms because it's just the contracts that we want to see. And then outstanding balance one by one. Customize, make it $1 or whatever currency you're operating in, and then I set the decimal places in manual and just have 2 decimal places. And then you can have, to be fair, it doesn't really matter anyway. I mean, that would equal 0. You might want to unselect voided contracts, but that's all I would want to see. So now I know what our total outstanding value is. So how much money is still due in to the business. What I could also do is add another widget, and this might be just useful, is total active contract value. So I can see how much money in contracts we have active at any given time. And then I can also see the total outstanding value. So we go to cog settings again, boards. We just want the contracts board. The groups would just be the active. And then we just want to go to the numbers column, go one by one and just go contract value. And then that's pretty much it. Go to customize, $, manual decimal places, 2 decimal places. So you can see that our total active contract value is 315. We've got 275,000 that has been paid. I mean, if you want to, and you're more than welcome to, you could have total paid value as well. I mean, you could work out the difference anyway, but let's just, for being thorough, let's just add that as well. So again, the board would just be the contracts board. The groups doesn't actually matter, I guess. And then numbers column would be the paid value here, which apparently nothing has been paid, which I find that hard to believe. But we go $, manual, and then 2 decimal places. We'll look into why that is the case. And then we've got active contracts completed and voided. Active is the only one that we want. So we've got total paid value. Apparently that's $0. I mean, that doesn't make sense. 315, 275, something must have been paid, right? So that's paid value of 25,000 here and 15,000. And then I just don't understand why it's not pulling across. I got term value. It might be because we're doing, if I get rid of those, let's see what happens. Set formula. No, it's something to do with the formula, and I don't think I'm going to try and work it out now, if I'm being honest with you. So I'm just going to delete that for the time being. I'm pretty sure it's possible. It's just some formula columns within Monday.com, when you're mirroring them, can get really weird. There are ways of overcoming that issue. I'm not going to focus too much on that in this video, but you can see we've got a total active contract value, our total outstanding value. In all fairness, do we actually need to know our paid value? Probably not anyway. So we've got all of that information available to us. What I probably then want to look at is our delayed payments, and what we could go ahead and do is add a chart, and this is delayed payments by month and value. Delayed payments per month by value. So what I want to see is, when was it due? So we just go chart type standard. X-axis is going to be actually boards first. We just want the contracts board, payment terms board, sorry. X-axis is going to be the expected completion date. The Y-axis is going to be one by one, and it's going to be term value. And then we just want to go through all of this, boards, groups. We only want in here the delayed payments. So I can see that we've got a delayed payment that was due in July of 180,000. Okay, now you can also click into this if you want to go to customize, and we can maybe make this like red, as is definitely bad news that someone's not paid us $180,000. But if I then go back to our payment terms, and let's say I change this one to delayed, you can see the expected completion date for that was the 18th of June. So now both of those will show here, and I can see why is it customize edit for all colors, color all in red. There we go, that's what I wanted to do. You can see that delayed payments per month, we've got $25,000 in delayed payments in June, and then in July we have 180,000. I can then click in and I can see which payment terms are delayed for this particular contract. Obviously I can then investigate why. Also, what we're going to want to do is look at our forecasting. So now we've got a delayed, and we can see what's delayed, and once it's sorted, so once it's been paid, so let's say I pay this one gets sorted out, which would be nice, 180,000, right? This will then update automatically, as you can see. So now the only delayed payment we have was a June payment for this particular item on the June 2025, 25,000. Cool. So now let's look at some payment terms, future payment terms. So I'm going to move this to upcoming. I'll move this to upcoming just to give you an example. Then we'll set the completion date for this in the 16th of October. We'll set this one for, let's say, December 17th. And then let's set this one for, I don't think we did November. November. There we go. Cool. Now, obviously, as you build this out, it will become enormous, and you'd be able to see all of your payments, and I'm going to show you how to stack it by your different contracts as well, so we'll come on to that. So we go ahead and add a widget. It's going to be a chart. I'll reposition this over here, 3 dotted buttons, settings, and then our chart type is going to be a stack bar graph. Our x-axis is, before we do that, we just need to set the boards. We just want the payment terms board, we don't want the contracts board. So our x-axis is going to be one by one, and it is going to be the expected completion date. And then we're going to go ahead and stack it by the contract. So you can see we've got, there we go, each of our contracts. And then our y-axis is going to be one by one, and then the term value. So we can see our cash flow, and then the coloring. I don't know why it's different colors. Let's just find out why it's got different colors. Example contract. Apparently I've got 2 example contracts. Is that right? I do. Number 1, and let's call this example contract number 2. Number 1 again, or what am I doing? We'll go here and then set this as number 2. So we've got contracts and payments. I can see here that I've got a payment for example contract number 2. And what would happen is, let's say this one is also due in November. It would batch, as you can probably see, it now batches like this. So I can now see my cash flow by payment expected, cash flow by contract. So now I've got all of my payment terms. I can see the cash flow for all of my contracts based on their expected payment date. This will evidently allow me to see into the future as to what's going on, and then I can manage my delayed payments per month by value as well if that crops up. This can obviously become a lot more advanced, as I'm sure you can imagine. There's not a lot else that I want to show you here. Obviously you can look at things like date created, date completed. You can look at the delayed status, and then you say how much time between the expected completion date and the delayed and between it being delayed to completed does it take. You can then track that information and then get obviously an average of delayed to completed and then factor that into your cash flow. But this is a basic way of getting your contracts and your payment terms sorted, and then you can see your cash flow, and then you can see your cash flow by all of your contracts. So hopefully that all makes sense. This obviously can become way more advanced when you start looking at connecting your payment terms with your phases, and then you have an invoicing board, which is entirely separate as well. But this is the bare bones. Hopefully it gives you an idea as to what is possible. If you've got any questions, queries, or requests, drop a comment in the comment section below this video, and I will do my absolute best to answer any questions. If it's a really good question, I will make a video answering the question for you. And also, if you would like us to help you set up Monday.com for your business, doing things like this, things probably a lot more complicated than this, check out the link in the description below. Book a call with myself. We can have a chat about how we could potentially help you get things like this set up for your business with automations, integrations, and AI. Anyway, thank you for taking the time to watch this video, and I will see you soon. Goodbye.